Welcome to The Secret Case. Today we will explore one of the most shocking and devastating events in modern American history, the Columbine Massacre. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold left an indelible mark on the history of school violence when, in 1999, they carried out one of the most heinous shootings at a high school. The Columbine tragedy forever changed the way educational institutions and society at large view school safety. Before we get into the details of this heartbreaking case, we remind you that 95% of those who watch our videos are not subscribers. If you are interested in these criminal cases and want to be kept up to date with each new analysis, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Eric Harris was born on April 9, 1981 in Wichita, Kansas. He grew up in a military family, which meant he was constantly moving due to his father's job. This itinerant lifestyle deeply affected Eric, who often felt like he didn't fit in. Although he appeared to be a normal child in his childhood, he gradually developed a dark personality, marked by rage and a desire for revenge. By the time he reached his teens, Harris was already a disturbed young man, who fantasized about violence and chaos. Dylan Klebold, on the other hand, was born on September 11, 1981 in Lakewood, Colorado. Unlike Eric, Dylan grew up in a more stable environment, but from a young age he showed signs of depression and social isolation. Although he was a good student, his inner world was plagued by feelings of rejection and hopelessness. Dylan's friends often described him as shy and reserved, which contrasted with Harris's more outgoing and dominant personality. The meeting of the two young men was the turning point. Despite their differences, they shared a sense of alienation and hatred towards the school system and society. Their friendship was based on a common resentment that, over time, would transform into a thirst for violence. By 1998, Harris and Klebold began carefully planning the attack on their high school, Columbine High School, in Littleton, Colorado. Their initial plan was not simply a shooting, but a massive bombing that they believed would dwarf any previous tragedy. The two teenagers began collecting firearms, ammunition, and making homemade bombs, which they attempted to test in various isolated locations. They infiltrated online communities where they exchanged ideas and strategies with other disturbed individuals. Eric, in particular, kept a journal detailing his darkest thoughts and plans. In his writings, he showed a clear inclination towards narcissism and unbridled hatred, with the idea of becoming a kind of legend after the massacre. The scariest thing about this planning is that, to the outside world, they both seem like normal students. Although some close friends noticed changes in their behavior, no one imagined the level of devastation they were about to unleash. On April 20, 1999, Harris and Klebold arrived at Columbine High School with a clear mission: to wreak havoc. They arrived around 11 a.m., armed with several firearms and homemade bombs. Their original intention was to detonate the explosives in the cafeteria during lunchtime, which would have caused mass carnage. However, when the explosives failed to detonate, they decided to execute the alternate phase of their plan, to shoot into the school. For nearly an hour, Harris and Klebold roamed the school hallways, opening fire on students and teachers. The horror at Columbine that day is hard to describe: the panic, the screams, and the helplessness of those who could not escape. 12 students and one teacher were killed, and 24 others were injured in the attack. Finally, after spreading terror, the two young men took their own lives in the school library. What left many stunned was the apparent lack of remorse or compassion for the victims. Harris and Klebold died convinced that their act would make them some kind of heroes or martyrs in their twisted worldview. Following the horror of the Columbine Massacre, the local community and the nation as a whole were plunged into a state of mourning and confusion. Families of the victims had to deal with the unbearable pain of loss, while survivors were psychologically scarred by the experience. The impact was so strong that Columbine was no longer simply the name of a school, it became a symbol of the tragedy. Nationwide, a wave of concern about school safety emerged. Parents began to demand more security and prevention measures, and questions were raised about how these acts could have been prevented. In response to the tragedy, many schools across the country implemented new policies, such as installing metal detectors and having armed security guards on campus. While these measures offered some level of comfort, they also brought with them a widespread feeling of fear and paranoia in schools. The debate over firearms was another central point that emerged after the massacre. The ease with which Harris and Klebold acquired weapons and explosives was harshly criticized, and many advocated for stricter control of gun sales. Despite numerous protests and demonstrations in favor of gun control, the issue remained without a clear solution, something that remains a topic of debate to this day in the United States. In the media, the Columbine Massacre generated unprecedented coverage. Television channels and newspapers were quick to publish the most graphic and lurid details of the tragedy, which in turn sparked a debate about the role of the media in glorifying the killers. Some experts pointed out that such coverage could encourage other disturbed individuals to imitate these acts, a phenomenon that has been called the contagion or copycat effect. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Columbine Massacre is trying to understand the reasons behind the actions of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. What drove these two teenagers to commit such an atrocity? The question remains the subject of study and debate. Eric Harris is described by many experts as a narcissistic young man with psychopathic traits. His diary writings reflect a deep contempt for humanity in general, and his obsession with violence and chaos is evident in his meticulous planning of the attack. Harris also displayed a constant need for control and power, which led him to devise a plan so destructive that he claimed it would change history forever. Many psychologists have suggested that Harris saw the massacre as a way to escape his own powerlessness and alienation, in order to become a feared and recognized figure. Dylan Klebold, on the other hand, is seen as more withdrawn and emotionally vulnerable. Unlike Harris, Klebold seemed to suffer from depression and deep emotional problems. In his writings, he expressed feelings of hopelessness and isolation, but also spoke about the desire to be loved and accepted. Despite their differences, Harris and Klebold shared a common hatred of the world and especially of the institution of school that they felt had marginalized and humiliated them. Bullying was also cited as a contributing factor to the massacre. Harris and Klebold, while not directly subjected to constant harassment, felt out of place in the social environment of their school. The pressure to fit in or conform to social expectations fueled their resentment. However, some argue that reducing the Columbine tragedy to bullying would be oversimplifying a complex situation. The psychological profiles of Harris and Klebold continue to be the subject of investigation. Both young men represented a combination of psychological, social, and emotional factors that led them to commit such brutal acts. As more experts studied the case, it became clear that mental health problems in adolescence are a crucial issue that needs to be addressed to prevent future incidents of this magnitude. The impact of the Columbine Massacre was not only limited to the media and educational policies, it also extended to popular culture. Numerous films, documentaries, and television shows have addressed the case from different angles. The documentary Bowling for Columbine, directed by Michael Moore, became an incisive analysis of gun culture in the United States, using the Columbine case as a central example. In addition, the tragedy has been mentioned in songs, books, and other forms of artistic expression, reflecting its profound impact on society. However, this attention has also been the subject of controversy. Some critics argue that, by turning killers into figures of public interest, popular culture may be contributing to the phenomenon of copycat, the imitation of violent acts by disturbed individuals seeking notoriety. The internet also played a key role in the spread of the case. Numerous websites and forums began idolizing Harris and Klebold, turning them into anti-heroes for certain sectors of society. These online groups glorified their acts, which raised even more alarm among experts and authorities. The ease with which young people accessed violent content and plans to commit attacks online also raised new questions about the responsibility of digital media in inciting violence. The Columbine Massacre not only left deep scars on the Littleton community, but it also forever changed the discourse around school violence in the United States. More than 2 decades after the tragic event, we are still grappling with the same questions. How do we prevent future tragedies like this one? What signs should we look for in young people who are at risk of committing acts of violence? What is the balance between school safety and personal freedom? The legacy of Columbine lives on. The massacre has served as a reference point for the creation of school safety policies, the debate on gun control, and the discussion on youth mental health. Although some measures have been implemented, such as awareness programs and stricter laws on access to firearms, the problem persists. Thank you for joining us for this extensive analysis. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more content like this. Your support is key to continue bringing these cases to light and raising awareness about issues that are difficult, but necessary to discuss. Leave your comments and share your thoughts on what could have been done to prevent the Columbine tragedy.